Alright guys, I am back from my hiatus. So a little bit explaining to do on that. I got busy with college. As you probably know, I am a a freshman in college. I just got done with my first semester, which was hard as balls. I finally got back into playing this deck, and now that Dark Destroyer is back at 3, this deck is probably going to be the deck I'm playing for quite a while now, just because Kozmo is still my favorite deck of all time. It's very versatile, it's very aggressive, it can do a lot of things, has a lot of different builds, a lot of different fun ways to play it. And now that we have Dark Destroyer back at 3, the deck is almost back to full power. We just need 2 more teleports, which we'll likely never get back. But then again, we did get this back to 3, so... I finally picked up everything that I needed, so let's just get right into this. 3 Destroyer. Oh my god, it's so good to play this again. Something I hate that I love about this deck is I've managed to find it in, all different languages. I got English, I got Italian, I got Portuguese. The entire deck is basically as pimped out as I ever could. I've been playing this deck for so long that, everything I have is in different languages. The only reason this is not is because I was hoping to get a German one, but that has not come in yet, and I've not seen any on eBay recently, so I'm stuck with the English one, which I'm probably going to hold on to for a while, because honestly, this one's starting to grow on me a little. Just because it's a lot darker than these ones, so... yeah, 3 Dark Destroyer, there's nothing to say about this here. This thing's a lone fire, this thing plops your opponent's stuff, this thing summons anything from your deck that's a lower level than it. It's just too good not to play. Oh, one more thing before I put this away, so you guys can look at it anymore. Ooh. I decided to stop playing Planet now that we have 3 of this back. Planet's main reason for existing in this deck, at least in my previous build, was because it sets up a board presence while also getting you Tin Can. Let me explain. The main play you did with it, so say you open it and you have 2 big ships. The idea is that you summon it and you banish those 2 big ships, you have a straw man, you revive them, and then blow them up in the end phase unless it's an Eclipser, in which case you just search Destroyer, you want a Destroyer, summon it, pop itself, summon Tin Can. Then you have 2 negates, you have an untargetable dude, and if nothing else, say this planet gets negated, you get a search anyway, so... it was basically a starter, even though it put pressure on the board, which was really nice. But with these now back at 3, not really necessary anymore. You can still play. There's still an argument to be made that you can play 3 Planet, but it's either 3 or none, and I chose to go with none for this build. If you guys want me to do a Planet build, I can definitely do that in the coming days. It just depends on when I get back to playing again. I'm kind of just taking a break in terms of meta, just because it's been quite garbage lately, especially with that new Gumblar budget hand loop crap. I'm just not dealing with it. This is a remnant from the previous build where I played 3 planets. I'm not certain if I'm going to continue playing this, but as of now, I'm playing 2 Eclipser. It's another untargetable 3000 beater, and you run 2 of it instead of just 1, because you can revive, or no matter what, you'll at least get 1 off of these eventually, off Tin Can, because even if you dump the first one, you'll still have the second one for later, so... yeah, that's basically all you need for that. It negates traps, and Altergeist does really suck against this match. I'm not really super worried about things like Striker, because they can't really anchor anything in the deck outside of Tin Can or Strawman, but in which case you just tag dodge to keep their effects going, so this is just another one that you can draw into that's not bad. 3 Slip Rider, you flow down into this, and it comes up occasionally where you can make Infinity. Though, something I found I've been finding myself doing a lot lately is that against one of your hardest matchups in terms of Cyber Dragons, that deck's always your hardest match, just because if you go first and summon anything that's a machine, they can just summon any monster in their main deck and then just wipe your field. So, but you actually make Durendal instead of Infinity against this deck, because for one thing, they can Chimera Tech it regardless, so... But they have to usually get their searches off, especially turn 1. So something like a Emergency, Durendal can actually negate Emergency. It's not negating in the regular sense where it just negates the activation, destroys it. It's negating it by changing the name, so that because Emergency cannot be negated, or it has the effect to where it's negated, or I believe it has some sort of thing with negation where you can add it back to hand or something. You can eventually stop that, because it changes the effect. It doesn't negate it and then change it. So you change the effect to popping. So the one example I had was I had one of these on the field. And I had a Strawman and a Call of the Haunted. This was attached to Call of the Haunted. I summoned the Strawman effect, summoned the Slip Rider, made Durendal, attempted to mulligan my hand, and then he ashed it. but I still had a material underneath it, so I could use its effect to negate something. Well, negate again. So what happened was he goes emergency. So neither of us realizes until it happened, but when he does that, I can change the effect to basically pop my dead and call the haunted for free, and then he cannot resolve a search. So that came up a few times, surprisingly, but Slip Rider at 3 is almost essential because you can't really deal with Backrow outside of this, and you don't run Twin Twister or Cosmic because life actually matters in this deck, especially if you go into time. This thing will basically just lose every time when you go into time, because most of its damage comes out in the battle phase. So 2 Forerunner and 1 Landwalker. These were just more things I can float into, except for Landwalker is something I can actually send off Tin Can and then use it as protection if I have Called Haunted, or if I can Mojo, pop my thing, resolve it, and then summon this. This thing's effect is a continuous effect, so that means that anytime your opponent would do something like, say they Dark Hole, you can chain Call the Haunted, summon this that you've dumped off of Tin Can, and then you can still protect, because it does not activate. So Forerunner's just here because it's another big untargetable dude. Basically this build of the deck is just putting out a bunch of untargetable dudes on the field so that your opponent cannot really out them, and then just pushing pressure that way. It's because every time they out one of these, you get another one, and then just keep pushing for damage or making pressure on the board. So these were pretty good. That's it for the machines. For the pilots, you play 3 Tin Can. This thing's a win button. Like, it's Painful Choice that can summon a big dude from your hand. If you get Destroyer, it's basic. And if you have double Call Haunted or any Call the Haunted, you can just keep fueling it so that no matter what, you will always have some sort of response to your opponent. Yeah, this thing is ridiculous. Like, I low-key think about just running Soul Charge just for this card specifically, or Monster Reborn other than Call the Haunted. Just because this thing's ability to just dump 2 and add 1 is just ridiculous. And it can summon any thing in the archetype outside of planet, so. 2 Dark Lady. My hardest matchup is usually the Cyber Dragons, but in terms of actual meta relevance, Striker sucks, and Goki is not really a big deal. Any extra link is really not a big deal, but if you can go first and set this up, this just makes their board harder to put on, and you can just Call the Haunted, summon this in your opponent's turn by phase, and then they just can't. It's just harder. It puts more pressure on the board without big targetable ships, and this can summon anything from your hand mostly. So, 2 Strawmen. I've considered putting this to 3, but it's not really good to draw mid or game or in your first opening hand, just because it only really does amazing in the mid game where it just summons any ship and then revive, or like you summon any big unfloatable ship like a Forerunner or something. You add back a Destroyers. Swing with both monsters, tag out for Destroyer, pop the thing, summon Farm Girl, and just push for more damage. This thing's more of an enabler than a starter, so you play 2 of this and 3 Tin Can over anything else. 2 Farm Girl, again, this is just like another push for the OTK. You could probably make an argument for just 1, but I run Desires, and I don't really want to banish this. So yeah, 2 of these are fine. 1 Good Witch, this you can probably cut. I decided not to because this thing outs like weird shit, like barrier statues, fossil Dyna, BLS, like the Dynamite Knight, and like all the other Draco stuff. Putting them face down so that way you can like do your swing. So 1 Sword Trooper reviving stuff is important. This can be 1 card rank 3 depending on the circumstance. I don't make him that or use his effect that much, so I only run him at 1. But in hindsight, you could probably make an argument for 2. I just don't at this time. 1 Wicked Witch. Yeah, like the mirror's been more prevalently because of what's it called? The Banlist. So I decided to just keep this at 1. I can just float down into it and not die for a turn. So that's it for the monsters. I don't play any hand traps. The only hand trap I would actually make an argument for is 1 Ghost Ogre. Just because you can, if you have nothing else to do, you can just summon it off of Teleport and you can still resolve its effect because it's a Psychic. But this deck is just OTK for days, and its main deck is my side. My main deck is my side deck, so Dark Lady basically does anything in terms of hand traps I need it to do, and nothing else. Destroyer and Mojo are basically bells. So for the spells, 3 Town. I play no Terraforming. I do this because I don't want to really open multiple of these. If you're in a situation where you're opening multiple of these and you have to keep mulliganing, is that a word? I'm going to say that's a word. For more cards, then you're really kind of losing. I'd rather just keep the combo pieces in the deck, like things like Desires, more draw power, Upstart, triple allure, you'd rather just get those instead of this. And this is really like the best late game or mid game. It's not really that great early game, especially if you're past like doing a play where you have to bounce or banish Tin Can to summon anything, return it back to draw card. You're losing, and if you're losing, you're not doing the deck right. So I prefer no terraforming over this. Plus, you don't really want to see multiples. There's just no reason to. 3 Pot of Greed, and 2 Pot of Greed, and 1 Upstart Goblin. That's not Upstart Goblin. Upstart Goblin's not in here. Why is Upstart Goblin not in here? Imagine there's an Upstart Goblin in here. This thing's Alert Darkness is a Pot of Greed. This thing is Pot of Greed. You gotta have as many combo pieces in your hand. You can play this now because Destroyer's at 3, and you can't waste your Destroyers in this deck back when the thing was around. But now that we have 3, you can. Because as long as you have 2 somewhere, or at least 1 somewhere, you can do a loop where you get more damage on the field. So this thing's pretty good nowadays. Yeah. 1 Teleport, because it's at 1, unfortunately. 1 Dark Hole, 1 Geki, and 1 Reasoning. This thing's another Teleport. It's unfortunate this thing isn't around anymore. I really like this card. Yeah. Like, it's summon, like, all your monsters are different levels. If your opponent's smart, they'll call 8 so that you don't get Destroyer and either kill a monster they control or Lone Fire for anything. But most people are bad against this deck, and they always call 1 or 3, just because those are the most common ones. And especially turn 1, they always call 1 on this, which is wrong. If your opponent is playing Kozmo, and you know it, and they're activating this, call 8, always. Because otherwise, they'll summon Destroyer, they'll summon anything in their deck. That's lower level, so, yeah. That's it for the spells. For the traps, you play 2 Mojo and 3 Called Haunted. You don't play Oasis, because Oasis summons in defense. This deck really wants to just push for damage. Summoning it in defense, yes, this thing can be Twin Twistered, but keeping them in attack where they're doing their best, because most of the big untargetable ships, their defense points are rather weak, with the exception of Eclipser, where I believe he's at 2400 or something. He's above 2k, which is pretty decent buff, or a pretty decent booty, but you want to be able to activate this on your turn and just push for damage. So 2 Mojo instead of 3. You can probably run this with 3 if you want. The argument I see the most is that you shouldn't be running Dark Hole Geki. If I had my way, I would be probably putting in 1 more Mojo and cutting the Geki and keeping 1 Dark Hole, just because you can actually use it during your turn, but I find that they don't really affect each other that much. I hate running traps in Kozmo, because I wish these things were like quick play spells, but that doesn't exist yet, so that's it for the main deck. To be honest, the extra deck is basically irrelevant. The only things that actually matter are these: Infinity Nova, Volcasaurus, Pleiades. Backrow, monsters, and negation. You make this when you're pushing for game, usually. If you're in a game, the thing is though, is that if you're in a game state where you're making Infinity, you're winning. If you're making Infinity, you really want to have it there because you either don't have Eclipser to stop Backrow, or you want to be able to negate something stupid like a Fraulein in the zombie extra link deck, or like an Honest or something. But this helps push for game. So for the rest of the extra, it's really up to your preference. These are just cards I like because they're pretty. Excite Knight, Big Eye, Draco Sack, Felgarand, Herald, Grand Pulse, Durendal, and then you run, for links, you run 1 Wee Witch. You don't run the light one because all your damage is coming from the dark monsters, Dark Destroyer, Dark Eclipser. Those are usually your big ones. And then 1 Underclock. Yeah, this thing is probably better than the light one, just because it's generic and you don't have to use light monsters, and this can boost anything. So then for the fusion targets, you play this because people are actually still stupid enough to negate the summon of the Nova over the Infinity, so this just punishes them, and the extra deck's irrelevant. I've actually at one point played 3 targets for it because I've actually made 3 targets for it. Like, I think the situation was like I was making Nova, and this was back when I ran double Infinity, double Nova. I made the original Infinity, they strike it. I summon, this is obviously Master Rule 3, by the way, but this is how long I've been playing this deck. I summon this, my opponent, and then I call the Haunted back to Unova, so I can make another Infinity. My opponent Torrentials, I summon the Cyber End Dragon. I proceed to have a second call, this is back when I ran Oasis. I summon it off of Oasis. My opponent has another Torrential. He nukes my board again, so I summon, I think it was either another Cyber End Dragon or another. Oh no, it was the big the Roy drill thing. Just because I didn't have a second one of this at the time. So I summoned that. My opponent basically just stopped playing because he's like, who the fuck actually runs multiple targets for Novas? Like, me, dude. Like, are you serious? Yeah, the extra deck makes it irrelevant, except for like Barbroid and Infinity. So, yeah, that's it for the deck. I'm really glad to have Destroyer back at 3. It has made this deck so much better. It made it more consistent. It made it more combo-licious. It made it more explosive. So, I hope you guys enjoyed. If you guys have any questions or comments you'd like to leave, please leave those comments, and I will get back to you as soon as possible. If you have any, if you'd like to give me any tips about how I can improve this deck in the future, or the side deck or extra deck, please let me know. So that is it. I'll see you guys later. Bye.